Hello, everybody. Welcome to the podcast, UBU Cast. Today we're going through our daily topic, which is hustings and registering to vote. We are going to be weekly, every week, coming out on different days. We'll have a set day coming out very, very soon, and everyone will be involved into sending their own news or information needed to be on the podcast. So we have some news of today. We have a couple of news of today. We have a hustings for election. That will be at the venue, Norcroft Atrium Building. That will be a type debate, which will give student voices. The date is on Monday, the 25th, 5 p.m. till 7 p.m. If you want any more information, contact Samira, your student affair officer. We also have a nice event by Bosom, British University Society of Opera and Musical. Their place and venue will be at Amp Stage in Student Central. That will be a performance on Tuesday, the 26th of November, 7:30 till 10 p.m. And on other news, we have My Guide, sponsored by Guide Dogs UK, which is credited. That'll be at the Student Central. That'll be an educational thing that will help students guide the ability to guide people that is blind at any moment. That'll be on Wednesday, the 27th, 1:30 till 5:30. And in other news from other sabbaticals, new kit is coming soon. Talks from many other suppliers have been on talk. By Under Armour, O'Neill, and our current one, Kurt Rill. Tell us what you think about it and talk to your sports officer, Zane. He also has Yorkshire Cricket Board create a new stadium at Bradford Park Avenue, looking at students, volunteers, and offering internships. So again, please go and contact Zane and the sports officer. So we have our guest today. I'd like for him to introduce himself.
Thank you, Renoy. Thank you for having me. My name is Faz Ilyas. I'm a student here at the University of Bradford. I'm currently studying civil and structural engineering. I was a sabbatical officer for the last 2 years here as well at the Students' Union. Really enjoyed my time here and making a positive impact for students. And now I often do get involved in my local community, particularly through the Labour Party. I'd consider myself as an activist, but I do hold some official positions as a local parish councillor in the village that I live in, just by Bradford, called Clayton. I'm also the Labour Youth Officer for Bradford West, and I'm a secretary for Clayton and Fairweather Green. So yeah, I think it's important for us to know where I sort of come from when we're talking today as well.
Yeah,
particularly as I'm affiliated with Labour Party. I'm a member of the party, so therefore I guess I am a socialist, and so I guess some of the things that we might be discussing, you'll be able to see where I'm coming from, hopefully.
Yeah, opinions are valid.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll talk about them. But the first topic that we're going to be going through today, which would be husting. So husting is a very important thing. Just a quick definition. A hustings is a meeting where elected candidates or parties debate on policies and answer questions from the audience. Hustings provide voters with the opportunity to hear the views of the candidates or the parties. When all candidates or parties are standing or invited, a hustings does not promote any particular candidate or party because they all have the opportunity to speak and to be questioned. So, what I'd love to ask my guest is, what do hustings mean to you?
So, I've run for elected positions on a few occasions now, and I've been involved in, I believe as a candidate, I've been in 3 hustings myself. Last time when we had a general election, I helped out with the Bradford West hustings and arranging that. But I've also hosted hustings as well in my capacity as a sabbatical officer as well. So I do know a fair bit about hustings. I think for me, a hustings it's that opportunity for the candidate, it's the opportunity to showcase themselves. Basically, most people haven't made their minds up right in an election, and they don't make it until they actually hear what's coming out of that person's mouth. When they sit down, they get to see that person perform for half an hour to an hour, or in my opinion, it should be longer. But however long it is, a lot of people A lot of people are still independent. You see, there are a lot of people out there. They've not made their minds up.
Yeah,
they want to hear from the people.
From my generation.
Yeah. So I think a hustings for the candidate is that first opportunity to make that big impression and see what's going on. Like obviously last night there was the debate on ITV against the Prime Minister and the leader of the opposition.
Yep.
And it was interesting to like see afterwards on the feedback. A lot of it, the people that attend a lot of these sort of hustings, a lot of them are usually already sort of fans of a particular candidate, so they've got their minds made up. But it's more interesting to see where those independent people are and how they see that hustings. For the people, it's the opportunity to hold to account their elected representatives, particularly if they're up for re-election. It's an opportunity to sort of grill them, ask them about their failings in the past, maybe ask them what they're going to do better next time. So it's one of those rare opportunities that we actually get to do some real accountability, I think, which unfortunately I think in our democratic system sometimes we don't get that opportunity enough to hold our representatives to account. Sometimes you might not get to hold them to account for 5 years sometimes, particularly if it's an MP or something. But hustings is super appropriate. And it also, I'll tell you another thing as well. I think in this day and age where you get candidates that put forward, sometimes you get what's called as what's known colloquially as paper candidates. Yeah, so somebody who's not really interested in standing, they put their name forward, they're just like a token holder or whatever, a placeholder. And when you have a hustings, people that don't really show up to those, it showcases that either they're staying away from accountability, or this person's just not really interested in the election. It's not a serious candidate. So if somebody doesn't turn up to a hustings, it showcases that.
Yeah, it does, because that's what I was going to ask you as well. As our university, we have a lot of elections, and we have people that go for different positions, in sabbatical officers to council execs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
I was wondering, why should the university take part in hustings? Why is it important for us to also have accountability for people so small?
Yeah, I think, every single time, right, like you elect somebody, they've got this duty, right? Like they're putting themselves out there to do a job on behalf of people. Basically, you become the servant of the people that you're putting yourself forward for to represent. So therefore, those people need to know who they're voting for. They need to understand where do they stand on a particular issue. For example, I'll use an example in America. So in America, there's a lot of legalized corruption, and people are really fed up with that. And it's massive. It's like a populist movement where it crosses between the two big parties there, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, and it crosses that division, right? Yeah. People on Democratic side as well as the Republican side are fed up of people taking bribes, and sort of like taking campaign donations, which technically we all know they're bribes. Exactly, they're going to influence people, and to an extent that happens here in this country as well. So it's for you to understand what sort of person you're going to elect. Now, on a localized level here at the university, it's really important for us as students to get involved and hold our representatives to account. So if it's on like a smaller level within the students' union, you want to know if a student's going to fight for your rights, right? Yeah. You don't know, you might have a student that's standing there and they might be in favour of increasing your tuition fees, so they might be giving the green light to the university to increase your tuition fees, whereas you need to tease that out. Yeah. And that opportunity, sometimes you never get that on a platform like that. And one of the interesting things about hustings is when you say something on the hustings, it's on the record.
It's always on the record, yeah.
Exactly. So if you go up to somebody and you ask them sometimes face to face, they might say to you, "Yeah, Renoy, don't worry. Like I'll give you 3 cheeseburgers for a year, right? Because that's what you're interested in. You just want cheeseburgers. They say, yeah. And then somebody else is like, oh, I want you to ban cheeseburgers, right? And somebody will say, don't worry, I'm going to get those cheeseburgers banned, right? But when they've said that on a one-to-one level, there's nobody really there to hold them to account. When you ask that question on the stage, right, people are going to hear what you said.
Everybody.
Exactly. So that's why it's super important for us to get involved in these hustings. I think the university needs to get involved in the national politics and giving that platform, because we've got over 8,000 students here at the university. They need to be given their opportunity to see what their candidates are and what the national discussion is. Particularly when on one side you've got a Labour Party that's talking about ending tuition fees, and that's a massive win for students, right?
That would be.
Yeah. Whereas what are the Tories offering? Nothing.
No.
And why are they not? So then that way those sort of discussions you want to tease out in a hosting. That's why any hostings that the university is arranging with the Students' Union, I would definitely say it needs to be focused towards students. So it should be about student issues. Housing is a big thing for our students.
Yes, it is.
Right, welfare, mental health, right. There's a lot of talk about safe spaces and freedom of speech on university campus as well.
True.
Right, all these are the big issues that we as students want to hear about.
They definitely do. Can you give us a quick advice on how to run a student hustings? How would you say to run a student hustings properly? Because I've been in hustings before, and they just
I've seen some terrible hustings, right? I remember speaking in being a candidate in a terrible hustings once as well. I think the first and most important thing is that the hustings needs to have a very good and strong chair, right? And I think when I was looking at ITV's hustings or debate, whatever you want to call it, last night as well, the chair was firm in certain times, but sometimes not enough. And sometimes you want that chair to be there to make sure that the conversation is going in the right direction, and that the candidates are answering the questions as they should. We know our politicians, they like to skirt around the answers a lot of the time. So there needs to be a level and sort of leeway to the chair or the person that's hosting it, right? So some people call it a host, some people call it a chair. So you need a good, strong chair to make sure that the conversation stays along the same lines. The other thing is, I think timing's an issue as well. I think, for example, last night the debate was an hour. It was an hour long. Half an hour of it, I kid you not, half an hour of it was about Brexit, and Prime Minister kept bringing in Brexit again into every other issue as well. The reality is, we want to hear about a wide-ranging amount of issues, and you want that discussion to go back and forth sometimes. So, for example, what did we hear on climate change last night? I don't think we heard much at all. Nada. Do you get it? So what are we hearing about corruption? What are we hearing about our political system? Over the last 3 years, if it's exposed anything, it's that we've got a failing political system here, right?
A lot of money on Brexit recently.
Exactly. So, what impacts and consequences does this have on democracy? And that's why, that's what I sometimes like about the American debates, right? They spend 2.5 hours on them or something, right? Really lengthy pieces of time. But the downside there is they have 20 candidates, so nobody gets a word in edgeways. So again, here, I'd like to see longer times. It needs to be televised or streamed online. I think we're looking at online now. That's why it's impressive. We've got a podcast here, right? A lot more people are going to hear a podcast because they're going to be able to go back to it later on, watch it, listen to it, see what was spoken about and shared. And that's something that we need to implement in our hostings as well. And at the same time, I think there needs to be a level of audience participation as well. Right?
I understand that. I do.
Because, and again, it needs to be controlled as well, because you never want it to be completely one-sided or whatever it is. But I understand maybe a vetted process of getting a wide-ranging amount of issues. And again, back to the chair as well. It needs to be somebody neutral as well, right? Somebody clearly neutral, not somebody who's biased one way or another. And obviously, everybody does have their own political affiliations, whatever they might be. But it needs to be somebody that's able to hold their own and give fair opportunity to everyone on the stage.
Yep, that's
Yeah.
exactly what we need. We need a proper chair. I think that's what university keep forgetting. We need a
Yeah.
chair. We need someone that sits there and say, "Hey, no."
Yeah. Actually, that reminds me, a fact checker. Do you know
Fact
something?
checker.
Yeah, and I'm not on about
True.
the Tories fact checker last night, right? So
Yeah.
if anybody's following that up, last night the Tories Conservative Press Office rebranded their Twitter handle, right, called Fact Checker UK, right, and right, and that was completely biased, right, but ridiculous. But anyways,
Fact checker.
but we
Man,
need
they do.
fact checking, you
They
know,
do.
right?
They
Like
do.
live, like we need. Do you know if you've got a good qualified individual that's in the chair that's able to, let's say one of the candidates says, for example, like a particular individual last night mentioned 40 hospitals are going to be coming into the UK, right, and they're promising 40 brand new hospitals, right. A fact checker would be able to jump on that and say, hey, where was the evidence for this? Is this a pledge you're making? Because you pledged it a little while ago and it's not come through. If somebody
Very true.
if somebody tries to slight one of the other candidates on the stage, to hold that to account and say, where's the evidence on this? Giving the other person opportunity to come back. That's why I sometimes think, yes, there's impartiality, but then there's fact checking as well that needs to be done. Because sometimes you often see a lot of news presenters and stuff, they're really impartial, but the reality is, though, we need you to hold people to account as well. And that accountability is through that fact checking. So maybe we need to incorporate fact checking as well in our hosting.
Yeah, I believe so too. I believe
Yeah.
that gives us a step forward in our society if we can stop relying on opinions of the others, especially people in power. Cause
Yeah.
that's what we've been doing. We're relying on people that are telling us these things. But if we have a fact checker, they can say, yeah, that's correct. Where are you getting this information from? Is that correct? Yeah, that's correct. You know what I mean? Just to give us a clarity that they're not just feeding us,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Feeding us all these like lies or,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Just
Like,
give us proper.
It's you look online now and like most of us young people, right, we're all online, right?
All
It's
of us.
easy to check up on someone's record. So if you've got a politician who's up there, who's been up there for about 20 years, who's had a long political career, you're able to see what they voted on 5-6 years ago. Do you get it,
Very
right?
true.
Where do they stand on issues? For example, like where do they stand on the Iraq War? Where do they stand on gay rights? Right, all these different things. Where do they stand on them in the history?
Yeah.
And are they on the right side of the issue? Or are they on the wrong side of the issue? And that's where you need to look at that and see who's the consistent, who's been on the right side of those issues for a long time. If they've not, why have they changed? What's brought them to the right side? Or in some cases as well, what's taken them to the wrong side as well?
Exactly.
Right? And holding that to account, was there moneyed interests? Right? Was it?
There's
Yeah.
always some kind of money.
Money makes the world go around, doesn't it, Renoy?
Exactly.
And a lot of it's revolving doors as well.
Yeah.
People going into politics, going into companies, and moving about.
Moving everywhere.
Yeah.
That's how it is. We have to just be up on our candidates. Speaking of that, I was wondering that if everybody has voted already, not voted, sorry, registered to vote, because voting period is coming up very, very soon. Make sure everyone has registered themselves at using gov.uk. Just searching gov.uk, register to vote. You'll find yourselves applicable there. Make sure you're a British citizen, if not, a person of Commonwealth. Make sure you have your national insurance number, and you should be able to register to vote. The registration deadline is on the 26th of November. That will be at 12 a.m. So between there, that's fine. And then election day is the 12th of December. So yeah, make sure that you get your election and make sure you know when the election day is and know where your polling stations are. So 26th of November, that is the deadline. 12th of December, that is the election date. Please note them down and get yourself registering. So I wanted to ask you, why is it important for people to vote? Because right now, I'm not really, my personal opinion, I'm not comfortable with my candidates.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
I know my candidates are. I
Yeah.
just want to know, why is it important for people to vote?
So, do you know, us students, right, we have the opportunity to make a massive difference in this election, right?
We do.
And it's unbelievable, right? Because us as students, right, we actually have the opportunity to register in 2 places. We can only cast 1 vote,
Yes, we can.
right? But we can register in 2 places, particularly the students that are living away from home, right? So, Renoy, where are you from?
Me,
Yeah.
officially.
Yeah.
I'm Jamaican.
All right, but where do you live? Do you live in Bradford?
I live in Leeds at the moment.
Okay, so you live in Leeds, right?
Yeah.
And do you have student accommodation here or no?
Yes, I do have student accommodation.
So you have student accommodation in Bradford,
Yeah.
right? So Renoy, you're a good example of this. I'm not, because I live in Bradford and I study in Bradford as well, right?
Fair enough.
So I'm from Bradford as well. So I'm an absolutely terrible example. But Renoy, let's use you, right? So you're from Leeds and you live here in Bradford, right?
Yes.
Now, for you to cast your vote, right, you can register in Leeds where you live at home, and you can register here in Bradford as well.
I registered. Right. I registered in Bradford. I haven't registered in Leeds. That's
so you can actually register in both places, and you can decide where your vote matters more, right?
Oh.
So it's really interesting, and so you could decide. Okay, in Bradford West, it was one of the highest majorities for Labour Party in the last election. Does my vote matter here? Or does it matter back home where maybe there's only maybe there's a minority, maybe it only requires a few hundred votes to turn that into a Labour seat, or it might already be a Labour seat anyway. I suspect it probably is here in Leeds, aren't you?
So it's a tough one on Leeds. Yeah. Leeds is a tough one, but I get what you mean.
So, but it's really important. Like, for example, like now, I think Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister right now, he's gonna be absolutely terrified. So. He's a candidate in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, right? A friend of mine, Ali Milani, give him a shout, right? He's standing as the candidate against Boris Johnson there. And the students in Brunel University, which comes under that constituency, right, could make a real difference to that election. Particularly since it's just going to be still in term time, I think. And imagine if all those students voted, it'd change the shape of our politics. Right, seats that were previously maybe unwinnable, right, could become winnable. It could reduce majorities. It could increase majorities for different parties. And again, that's why I think like it's super important to look at that. Why we should vote, right, is about the policies. I always firmly believe that. Yes, a lot of people are talking about trying to make this election all about Brexit, and a lot of us as students might be annoyed with that because we, as a students, we overwhelmingly voted to remain.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is there is so much more to this election than just Brexit. We've had 9 years of austerity now, right? Cuts to local councils, cuts to the NHS, cuts to police funding, cuts to fire brigade funding, right? Cuts to all these services, cuts to social care, right? Child care, right? Increase in children in poverty. All these things, right, matter to us. And again, take it back to students. Rogue landlords, right?
True.
Increase in tuition fees, right? Even when we were promised that it would never be increased, right? From the Lib Dems. Can you remember that one, right? So, all these things, mental health issues, right? Increase in mental health is massive right now. And yes, it's becoming a talking point, but it's just staying as a talking point. Action needs to be done. So, that's where we need to quiz our candidates and see where they fall on those issues, right? As students, right, we come to university, we come to it's a diverse place, universities, right? You meet people from so many different backgrounds, you make friends with different people from different backgrounds, and then you hear about anti-Semitism, you hear about Islamophobia, you hear about racism, right? All these things are prevalent in our society, but our leaders and our elected representatives have the power and ability to shape the discourse in our country.
Very true.
Right? Very true. We as voters are able to give them that platform. So if we vote for somebody that's not going to do anything and not going to speak about these issues, isn't going to present the good fight basically, then we're basically throwing away this country anyway ourselves. We need to be the ones out there making sure that we're getting involved in that conversation, making sure it's changing. And some people might think one vote doesn't matter. I guarantee you it does, right? I guarantee you it does. It was earlier this year in the council elections here in Bradford, and there's a particular ward called Tong, right? Not too far from here at all, comes under Bradford. And there was a Labour candidate and a Green Party candidate, and it came to a coin toss. 50-50, and it came to a coin toss. Imagine if
old school debate.
and anybody in that area that didn't vote, every single one of them lost out. Why? Because they probably had the ability to make that difference.
That difference. That
Do you
one
get it?
difference
That
is-
one difference.
is
That it required one vote.
instead of
Whoever.
money makes the world go round.
So
Made a coin toss with an election.
coin toss.
Coin toss. The money, man.
But-
It's the money.
But I think like that's why you have to realize that happens. And do you know what's funny about that election? Like the night before, right? I was a candidate as well in that election. I stood no chance. Yeah, I was in a
No,
Tory
run,
safe seat. You're on your own, and you contribute to the conversation,
Yes,
like
you
I said, right? So, and I was thinking about it. I was thinking, what happens if it's a draw? Because it's possible, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And lo and behold, the very next day when they're doing the count, there was a draw over in Tongue, and I was just like, wow, look, it does happen. It does happen. So vote makes that difference. One vote does.
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Because I'm gonna jump multiple questions here. Because I just want to hear what is your predictions.
My predictions.
What are your
Okay. On what though? On what? Let's say.
First, let's go on our general election.
Okay.
Our general election first of all, and then we can go into the Bradford
Okay.
election.
Initially, when I was looking at this first, right, I was thinking to myself, we're looking at potentially a hung parliament, right? But now, after looking at last night's debate,
Mm-hmm.
after looking at what's going on social media, the presence on there, looking at the 1 million people that are registered in, I think it was the first 15 or 17 days, something like that, since the election was called. 1 million young people registering to vote, right? I think Labour might just take it. I think Labour might just take it, right? And if they don't, I think you're looking at potentially like a coalition with maybe SNP or something like that.
Everybody's saying a coalition. To be
But
honest.
do I dare dream? I think we might see a Corbyn-led government and
Corbyn-led
government. Yeah, I think we might see a Corbyn-led government. In a worst-case scenario, I think what's going to end up happening is Labour's going to increase the number of seats.
Hopefully.
Yeah. And I think if you're looking at the polls again, the Tories are draining away that Brexit power share as well. So like, I find it comical when the Lib Dems say, or when Joe Swinson says, I'm like a real alternative to become a prime minister. And it's like, no, you ain't, man. And if you look at the polls over the last 3-4 days, mate, they're just plummeting, right?
He's not there anymore.
And it's interesting, you know, like everybody talks about this two-party political system, right? Before the election was called, right, Lib Dem was up there. Do you get it, right? They were up there. Brexit Party was up there. Like, it could have gone anywhere. Like, the election was a perfect opportunity. As soon as the election's called, people start to put their stake in the ground. They start to mark on the ground where they stand, right?
Yeah.
And Labour and Tories, the numbers always go up. But I really hope so, particularly after last night's performance, and hopefully there's a few more debates and sort of TV discussions. I think they're going to matter massively. I think social media is going to matter massively, and also the tactical voting. I think that's going to make a big difference as well.
Definitely.
Yeah. So hopefully Labour.
Hopefully Labour. So predictions, you hear it first. Labour.
Yeah, Labour.
I say Labour as well. So I'm not even.
We've got to live in hope, aren't we, Renoy?
I have to give it to someone. I think we had 3 Conservatives so far. Let's give Corbyn a go and see what he can do for us. Yeah.
Do you know one of the point I'd like to make, right, Renoy, is a lot of people talk about how the previous Labour government back in, when was it, 95, 97, whenever they were elected, right?
How far that was.
Look at how far it was, and it was a different type of Labour Party. Definitely. It was not the same as it. It was like David Cameron's government light. It was like a light edition of that. The reality is right now, the Labour Party right now is a socialist workers' party right now. And that's different. Socialist is, anyone can be rich, but nobody should be poor. Right? And I read that online somewhere this morning, I think, on Facebook or something. I thought, that's what a socialist is, right? And why should people be living in poverty in this country, right? Where the 5th largest economy in the world, right? And we've got children living on the streets. We've got poor people, right?
Life expectancy has gone down.
Exactly,
life expectancy has gone down.
Right?
It's reversed.
That's shocking, right?
In the UK.
That's shocking. how can we live in this country and we can have that level of inequality, basically? So Yeah, man. Like we've got to vote Labour, man. Oh
So
man,
we
I'm gonna be crying after this election, mate.
Oh my god, thank you so much. Alright, I'm just gonna give a quick summary of today.
Yeah.
Basically, just going over the events and the news of the week. So there's Hustings elections. Please go to Northcroft for that. It's a debate and give your student voices. The date is on Monday the 25th.
I think they're changing the date on that. You know, I think.
Maybe.
Yeah, I think just stay tuned. I think.
Stay tuned on the Hustings for election. They might change the date and they might change it, but please go to UBU reception if you want any more information on that, or speak to Samira, your student affairs officer. Then there's Journey Through Time, who Bosom, aka the Opera and Musical Society. They've got their performance at Stage Tuesday 26th of November, 7:30 till 10:30. And then we got My Guide, which is sponsored by Guide Dogs UK, which is also credited at Student Union. It's an educational thing, so come down on Wednesday the 27th, 1:30 till 5:30. If you need any more information, please speak to Adam at Student Union. Thank you very much. Would you like to say anything?
I think again, just I ask people like, look, I don't care what your I do, but I don't care like what your political standpoint is or whatever. But it's important, right, to get involved. A lot of people talk about how, oh, I'm not interested in politics. Politics got nothing to do with me. I hate politics. The reality is, every single thing we do day to day is impacted by what's going on in politics and what's going on in the policy decision-making world of our country, right? What's going on in Westminster, right? Students might turn around and say, oh, I'm just interested in getting my degree, getting my job, and having a beautiful wife and have a couple of children and like get a nice house and a nice car, right? The reality is though, like your ability to get a good job, right? For your ability to progress in your job, for your ability to buy a house, for your ability to live and finance a good lifestyle, right? A lifestyle that is livable, right? Is ultimately impacted by what the decisions this government makes. And that's why we have to make sure that in government we have the elected representatives that we want to see. And you need to ask yourself those hard questions and see what sort of country do we want to see. Do we want to see a country that moves to the far right permanently, or do we want a socialist society, right, that is going to make a difference for the many, not the few, right? I know it's like become a bit of a catchphrase now. Everyone's saying it, for the many, for the few, not for the few, right? But we need to actually see that is that the world we want to live in, like, and it's one of the, I feel as though like this election, everybody says it about every election, but this election genuinely is, right? We're seeing the rise of the far right all over the world. We're seeing the rise of fascism, man. Fascism is creeping in, and like our votes matter this time. We need to see where we're gonna vote.
Where we're gonna stand.
Yeah.
Well, like I said, after this election, is gonna be Happy New Year's to everybody. Whatever government we have it for the whole time. It's Happy New Year's after that, yeah? Everybody's going to be sitting on Christmas Day thinking, what government do we have? You know what I mean? So please remember to register to vote. At gov.uk, you have 12 days before the election for it to be processed. So the 12th of December is the election day. 26th of November is your deadline. Please register to vote. And thank you so much for coming on our show.
No problem, Renoy. I appreciate it.
And we'll be back every week, coming with new news and new events for you, and hopefully more hosts. So yeah, thank you, and see you soon.